And I'm just going to say hi, everyone, and hi, Tim. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm so excited you've decided to join me in this conversation today. And for our viewers, I just want to quickly share a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about today. So basically, the big topic of today's conversation is human design and the gene keys and anything else that may want to flow through in the moment. And so what inspired me to invite you to join me in this conversation today is basically I had a mirror session with you recently, about 3 weeks ago, and I was just so impressed and blown away by what came through in this session. I had been exploring human design for a little while and also looked at the gene keys a little bit, and it had been totally life-changing for me already. But I had always, I had probably had a few opportunities to book a session with somebody who does human design, but it just never really felt right to me, or I never felt that connection really where I felt that I was really going to get something out of it beyond what I had already understood through my own explorations. And when I met you, I just had this feeling that there was going to be something, a lot more magical coming through just through the conversations that we had already had. And that was definitely confirmed in the conversation that we had. So I felt inspired to ask you to, basically join me in this interview / conversation and share a little bit more about your work, because I really feel that what you do is so, so important and so valuable. And I wanted to see this as an opportunity to say thank you, first of all, and also to help spread the word about your work. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. That's a real gift. I so appreciate being here.
And so to start our conversation, I wanted to ask you to maybe just share a little bit more about yourself and your work. And I already mentioned the mirror sessions, but I guess most people here don't really know what that is. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how you work with people and maybe what you're working on right now as well. Just whatever you feel inspired to share.
Okay, wonderful. I can do that. I would love to do that. All right, so I'm going to do my best to keep this as succinct as possible, but there are several tracks happening all at once right now, and the mirror sessions happen to be one of them, so let's start there. A mirror session is basically my take on a human design reading. It is not a normal human design reading. We can get into more detail about kind of what I believe sets me apart in that regard from a lot of other people who are doing really good work in this area. But really, that's the guts of a mirror session. It's like we start there as a way of beginning to gain a really solid understanding for how you as an individual work. And human design is amazing like that. It's kind of like a window into the workings of you. Now, human design doesn't exist in a vacuum, and the gene keys is something else you mentioned. It's also something that I incorporate into these mirror sessions because the gene keys kind of evolved out of human design and provides a whole new perspective on the individual. A very beautiful and poetic perspective where human design can be a bit more technical. The gene keys are soft and they're spiritual. There's something you can get inside of. I often like to think of human design as a thinking system and the gene keys as a feeling system. So I like to incorporate both. And so that's the mirror sessions. The mirror sessions are a one-on-one experience in which I get to really kind of become present with an individual and read what I see in their chart, in their profile, and really begin to introduce, in this case, you to yourself. So the mirror sessions were a complete surprise to me, by the way. It's the only business that I've ever built by accident. In other words, it built itself through me, and it's not something that I consider to be a business so much as a genuine space of connection between two hearts. So that's the mirror sessions. Now the mirror sessions are growing. There's something I'm really excited about that I'm working on right now, which is a specialized mirror session that's focused specifically on the ideal dietary regimen basically there's this like advanced application of human design that allows us to get a real sense for how each individual is built to digest not only food but also information. So it's this really like important addition to the whole conversation in relation to human health. In fact, I personally believe that this application of human design is the single most important thing available to the modern human in relation to human health. So I'm working really hard to really bring this more to the forefront of the work that I do, because I think outside of meeting your human design, meeting your ideal dietary regimen is the most important thing that any person who cares about like really feeding their human process, it's probably the
Mm.
most important thing they can do. So, and I don't know if I've even told you so much about this, Anna, but it's like something I'm very excited about. It's something I've been studying for years and something I've been living inside of and actively testing for about a year and a half. So it's big. And then on a separate track, kind of, is my work with the whole system human methodology, which is something that I personally developed as a synthesis of all of these different systems that I've been studying for many years. And by many years, we're talking over a dozen years that I've been actively seeking to understand myself through healing systems and dietary systems, interestingly enough, and philosophical sets, belief systems. I've studied so many things. I'm a bit of a nut like that. So whole system human is kind of the condensation of that. It's where it all kind of comes together as a fine point. And the mirror sessions came out of whole system human. I was actually using human design to customize the experience of my whole system human work to each individual with whom I interacted. And it basically gave birth to the mirror sessions as a like a session by session alternative to the program of whole system human. So those are kind of the three big things happening. And I guess a fourth small track, I say small, but my parents would disagree, is I'm helping my family build a little like retail store out of our home here in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, that we call the Ukebug. And it's like, it's so much fun because it's something the whole family loves. But we're selling ukuleles, and we actually have the most diverse selection of ukuleles within hundreds of miles. And it's a lot of fun. So the ukebug.com is like a really fun place to land if you've got time on your hands and you love music. So there's a lot going on right now.
Mm. Yeah, sounds like a lot of fun and definitely a lot in the works.
Yeah,
And
none of it feels like work. That's what's so exciting about it for
that's
me.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always a good sign that you're on the right track when you're having fun. And yeah, I think it's really fascinating what you mentioned about like kind of exploring a relationship with food through human design. I'd actually love to hear a little bit more about that. I don't know if you want to share anything now or if you want to do that later.
Oh, I would love to.
But this has kind of been a journey for me as well. And like one thing I've seen in our conversations is that, and you mentioned that in our mirror session too, that um, you kind of like to study your way into things, and I'm more of an intuitive person in that way. Like I just kind of feel my way into things, and I kind of try to listen to my body. So this has actually been something that came back to me this year as well. One of the first things I actually shifted in my life this year was just changing my diet, because I knew that there was so much that was going on that I needed to release, and that just wasn't working. But I feel that really starting to listen to my body again, and just a few things that I always knew weren't healthy for me, but I wasn't really listening or paying attention. And I made those shifts, and I could immediately feel the change in my energy and how I started, then through that attracting the right opportunities as well.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more from your perspective as well. Um,
I would love to talk about that. Yeah, there's no better time than the present.
yeah.
So yeah, let's look at this a little more closely. I like that you said exploring your relationship to food through human design. I mean, can we just like trademark that real quick or something? It's perfect. That's exactly what it is. And this has been really exciting for me to notice over and over and over again how basically no matter what angle I come at, whether it's through a standard mirror session and reading the chart or something more specialized where we're focused on the dietary regimen, everything comes down to relationship. The human being is an organism, and that organism exists within a context. And something that human design does that's so important is it looks at that more holistic context within which the act of eating takes place. So it's not even about the food. You know, we talk about a dietary regimen, but ultimately this question of digestion is about digesting the information of the world around us, whether it's food in the mouth or a conversation that we're having or a book that we're reading. So it's a very expansive conversation. We just kind of focus it in on food. And this is partially because food in particular has a really powerful conditioning effect on the physical system. In fact, from the perspective of human design, there are two things in our experience which have the greatest effect or influence on our physical systems. The first is the environment, and specifically people. I mean, when we talk about environment, we're often speaking directly to the auric interactions, energetic interactions with other people. So people are the first thing, and the second thing is food. And most of us aren't paying very good attention to food, or else we're paying attention to food with an aim that is completely disembodied. So maybe it's like, I need to change how I'm eating so that I don't get fat, or I need to change how I'm eating because I have some kind of a sickness that requires this, or I need to change how I'm eating because then I can say I'm a vegan and feel like I'm better than everyone.
Oh my God, I've
Sorry,
been
vegan.
there.
That's a joke. That's a joke. Me too. That's why I can make those jokes. You know, anything I've lived inside of for long enough, I can crack on. That's how I figure. I went through this whole process with food. As long as I've been paying attention to my body at all, basically as long as I've been a conscious adult, I've had serious discomforts in my stomach. Um, like it always felt so uncomfortable, and I couldn't figure it out. And I even went to see doctors on a number of occasions, and the best that, you know, these doctors, they don't know about what happens in the digestive tract. They usually want to pin it on stress or leaky gut. You know, like they just make up a name because they don't know what to call it.
Mm.
They don't know what's going on. And no one could ever help me. And no matter what I tried for diets, it was failing. It was failing my body. I didn't know what to do, so I was guessing. And so I became vegetarian and I became vegan, and there were months on end, about 6 months, where I ate nothing but juice. I juiced, whatever you call that, you know, and then raw food only, whole foods only. I mean, everything that there was to try, I was trying, because that's part of my study. And that's an important point to make here, by the way, as well, is when I say that I study things, it's not just an intellectual pursuit. It starts there, but once I get the information, then I have to live inside of it to see if there's value. So that's what I was doing. And I mean, I still to this day have spreadsheets. I wish I could have had some prepared if I had thought about this. Spreadsheets for all the different types of supplements that I was testing, and like notes on what I noticed and what I didn't. I remember in particular, there was a period during which I was doing smoothies, and I had upgraded from juices to smoothies because now I wanted the fiber. I'm like, well, juices isn't cutting it. Let's try smoothies. And I was buying the best ingredients. All of the ingredients were locally sourced, all of the fresh ingredients, and all of the powders were like vetted by Tim, you know. and I can still make those recommendations, by the way, for anyone looking for good protein powders or any kind of plant-based powders. Anyway, very expensive ingredients. I would make this smoothie, and I would look at this smoothie, and I would go, this is the best smoothie ever invented, you know. And then I would drink the smoothie and I would feel sick. And I was so confused by this because I knew I was doing it right. Everything that I had studied said this is how you do it. And I would still cause me to feel sick. So I convinced myself that that's the price you pay for a healthy gut, you know. But I still felt sick, so it didn't fix anything for me. It wasn't until meeting human design and beginning to test my own ideal dietary regimen that I learned something interesting. And I'll spill the beans on my own just to give you an idea for how different this is. Is that okay with you, Anna?
Oh yeah, totally. Go for
Okay.
it.
All right. So just so you get a sense for how like far beyond food this goes, my particular digestion is extremely primitive in its function, okay? So my digestive type is one that can only understand one single ingredient at a time. And again, we're speaking about relating to food. So there's a relationship, an energetic relationship that's occurring between my digestive process and food. So because it's so primitive in its design, it can only take in one single ingredient at a time. And when I eat blended foods, it gets confused and it basically just eliminates them. So I'm not able to actually assimilate any of the value of blended foods, which is rather hilarious in hindsight and also makes me want to cry sometimes. That all of that time, energy, attention, and money that I was putting into these high-powered smoothies were in fact confusing my system, making me feel ill, and being thrown away. So there was nutritional content, there was nutritional value, but I wasn't able to make use of it because I didn't know how my own body worked. And so now I can actually feel better and gain significantly more benefit from an apple and a piece of matzah than I ever could from, a $20 smoothie. And that's really something. That's a total surprise, frankly. It was also, for me, it took me about a day of grieving when I learned that I could only really take in one single ingredient at a time because I love food and all of the food I love is blended. So it was a process, and it was a process of really learning about myself in a new way, which is a big step, by the way, for most people. And then honoring what I had learned and beginning to test it in real life. So this isn't the sort of thing to take lightly. And I think that's a really important message to get across too. Everyone deserves to have this information, but not everyone may be prepared to make use of it. So I'm hoping that the people hearing this and the people who kind of find their way to me one way or another find themselves prepared to really enter into the experiment of a lifetime and to continually expand their understanding of what's happening here and ultimately to enter into a way of befriending their own body. Does that make sense?
Mm, absolutely. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's really fascinating. And I think my own journey with food has been a little bit different. I've been I had a time actually like many years ago when I was struggling with like really extreme allergies, and I didn't know what it was. Like it was just like my skin and everything. And it was actually everything. Like it was also the relationship that I was in,
I'm like
and
looking at your chart, like, ooh, maybe I know something about that, Go ahead, keep going.
you have my chart there.
I have to.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Um, so that was a time in my life when I was just like in a really toxic situation in general. And then I think my body just wasn't able to handle all the toxins that I was taking in through my food anymore. So it started acting up, and it was like everything. It was also like dust and everything. um, but it took me a pretty long time to figure out what it was.
Mm.
And I tried to kind of figure it out on my own, and I went to see lots of doctors, and and I kind of had an idea in my mind about what it was. So in that way, it was a little bit similar, but probably took me about half a year until I could find a doctor who was able to or ready to do an allergy test with me or for me, and then I could finally see what it was, and then I started eliminating those things. But it was such a blessing because everything changed for me after that, like kind of like this year too, but on a much bigger scale. Like I really started just eating, I think, like a lot of whole foods and all the things that I feel are healthy for me, and eliminating all the additives. And then through that, I think like my entire life just started to change, because I feel it's so much about energy, the
Yes.
energy that we're taking in, and so much happens in the physical body as well, and I can feel how it affects my well-being.
Yes.
And
Actually.
so yeah, that's been a pretty interesting journey. And then I kind of started, neglecting those things a little bit more and not paying as much attention anymore. And then I could feel like the downward spiral.
Yes. That's an important part, though.
Mhm.
This is how we learn. And that's why I like that all of this is an ongoing journey. You and I are telling the story of like what led us up to now. And then there's going to be a whole story from this point forward, too. It was funny when I started running my experiment with the human design regimen. It was rigid. I mean, I was on point, and I didn't allow myself one single like slip up for 3 weeks, and everything changed in that 3 weeks. In fact, the discomfort in my stomach healed itself within 2 days, and I could
Wow.
feel differences in my body within the first meal. My body had literally never been fed that way, and I could feel it saying, oh, "Food," for the first time ever. But after 3 weeks, I decided, why don't I run a different experiment and see if any of this is like just my head or what. So my partner at the time and I, we got some Chinese food. Oh man, that I learned a lesson. Let's put it that way. My body knew that that wasn't the right food. Um, so it's like that, but you kind of need to swing the pendulum sometimes to really establish that value for yourself.
Mm. Absolutely. And is there anything else you'd like to share about this topic, the relationship to food or human design and food? Otherwise, I have a few other things that I wanted to ask you about today. Um,
Okay, I'm happy to move on.
mm,
We could go for days on this topic. It's a really
Absolutely.
important one.
I mean, it's really fascinating. Um, but I actually wanted to dive in a little bit more into like the business aspect of things, because that
Yeah,
was what
okay.
we talked about in our mirror session, and that's just something that I really love talking about, and I think will be really interesting for a lot of people in my audience as well. Um,
Let's do that.
so and I mean, yeah, we've been talking about maybe having more conversations like these in the future. So maybe we can do another one about food a bit later down the road.
One-
Um, so one of the things, let me just, my mouse isn't working. Just pulling up my questions here. Okay, so one of the things that really drew me to human design this year, actually it kind of found me, to be honest. I saw a lot of people talking about it, and eventually I got curious. But um, there was a time on my journey, as you know, I've been a business owner for a bit more than 10 years, but um, a little bit more recently, there was a time in my journey when I was just feeling really disconnected from myself and my truth and my calling and everything. I had worked with the kinds of people, and I know that quite a few people in my audience have experienced that as well. I hear that all the time, like certain things that tend to happen in the coaching industry when um, a lot of it is kind of focused on, okay, let's change your life, but then it's really focused on the ego and achievement and performance. And I've been there, I've done that. This is not really what I'm interested in anymore in my life. There's like something deeper that has been calling me for many years, but I kind of got into this space where I started getting sidetracked by all the advice that I was getting, or comparing myself to other people. And so about 2 years ago, I was feeling so incredibly disconnected just from everything. I had no clue. Like, I lost my passion for my work and everything. I didn't know. There's just this deep inner emptiness, and I started really I really had to take a break to really just feel into what I really wanted to create from that point forward. Um, and I did find answers just through that, through asking the right questions and just taking the time to sit with the feelings that were coming up, and really feeling into what I had been suppressing and all of those things. But there were still some things that just weren't working for me, especially in terms of strategy and the way I was launching things and marketing my work and growing my business in general. And there was this really extreme resistance that I just kept coming up against. And so I really started feeling my way into it intuitively, and I found a lot of answers. But when I discovered human design this year, I just had so many aha moments. Like, things just started clicking, and I saw that it just made so much sense, why all the things that I had tried didn't work for me, never worked for me. And so now this recent session that I had with you just even like gave me a lot more insights into this, and that's been so fascinating for me to see. So I wanted to ask you if you could share some examples of like how you could like apply this in a session, or if somebody came to you with these types of questions, like, what works for me in my business, what works for me in terms of marketing or creating my offers or anything like that. Could you give us like a kind of a practical example or a couple examples of what that could look like?
Okay, that's a great
Mhm.
question. I can say right off the bat that it's a
Mhm.
little different for everyone. So, and this is the point of the mirror session really, is to be this wide open container. Um, let's say, for instance, someone wants to book a mirror session and they don't know anything at all about their human design. the first conversation is always going to be a foundational one. You know, we really need to establish a sense for how the individual works, and each one of us works differently. So that's the beginning point. Now, you were an interesting case in that you had a lot of the beginning points together, and you had even been living inside of them for long enough to determine their value for you. So that's the first thing I want to say to anyone listening. If it's brand new to you, then we need to kind of set a foundation, and it's not just a theoretical foundation; it's a functional foundation. Human design is showing us how you work best, how you work when you get out of the way. It's really showing us an imprint of what's most natural for you. And it's also showing us an imprint, a window into what makes you so perfectly unique. Now, the trick to business, the trick to productivity, and the trick to creativity of any kind is connecting to that part of you that is most natural, that moves most easily, and that expresses with the most grace, okay? And this is a matter of connecting to your own genius. That's what we're really going to be focused on. And the different angles that we take to get into that, again, it'll look different for everyone. Let's say you want to focus on the business end of things. We might look at how your energy flows most naturally. We might really want to focus on, if we're using human design terms, we're going to look at the channels which are defined in you, see where the energy is moving and what it has to tell us about you. We're going to look at something in human design that's known as your incarnation cross. And when you cross map that to the gene keys, you're looking at your 4 prime gifts. Well, these are gifts that are really rooted deep inside of you that you can depend upon. We need to learn about those. The gene keys are also brilliant in that they introduce us to a few things. One that comes immediately to mind is your culture. There's a specific culture that each of us is here to serve, a specific community. Some of us are here to really be that like individual inventor, the genius who's doing their own thing. Some of us are here to serve in partnership. Others of us are here to serve in small units. That's me. Units of 3 to 15 people. Others in larger networks, others on a society level, and others on a system level. So there's like all of these different areas that we can bring ourselves forward in order to establish a sense for our own creative genius. Personal brand is available to us here. There's so many fun and really important angles for us to turn our attention toward. But what's interesting to me, and Dan, I think you would agree with this based on your experience too. You can say if it's not true though. What's interesting to me is that no matter what angle we come at it, no matter which system we use, the ultimate end is as simple as it can possibly be. And in many cases, as obvious as it can possibly be. So obvious, in fact, that we miss it. The ultimate end is always, you're here to be you. You're not here to build something for anyone else. You're here to show up for life and enjoy it. That's something that most of us have really struggled to understand. And even if we have understood it intellectually, we've really struggled to live inside of it, to trust that in doing so, something new comes to life. Many of us have been taught that to be who we are and to live inside of that space of like ease and naturalness is lazy. Or we've been taught that there's no way to make money from that position. And then I'm here, and Dan is here to say, well, maybe not. In fact, I believe very strongly that when we connect to that deeper aspect of who we are, the real truth of who we are and how we're supposed to work, it's like tending a garden and all sorts of new flowers come to life. Now, it might take us in a different direction than we had thought, but it will always take us in a direction that self-perpetuates beauty, ease, creativity. And now all of a sudden you're serving the people that you're here to serve. Your energy is moving in the directions that it's supposed to move. And if we want to talk about your aura, basically your being is attracting the sort of experiences, relationships, and resources that you need in order to continue the work that you're here to do. Basically, life can be easy, and the mirror sessions are designed to help you understand how it can be easy for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree on everything you said. And I found on my journey that nothing else works anymore for me. Like I've gotten to this point where if I try to do anything based on what I think I should be doing or what somebody else has told me, or I remember the last time I was working with a coach, that was like a topic that kept coming up for me. Like I constantly heard, "You're not doing enough. You're not doing enough," and I felt this resistance inside of myself that was just totally rebelling against that statement. I was like, it's not true. It's not that. It's just that,
Wow,
like, I was just feeling this inner conflict between what I, kind of thought I should be doing and what I felt I should be doing.
good.
They're totally different things. And I mean, this year, I've shared a little bit about this with you already, but this year I got to the point where I just had to make a decision, and I had to basically the decision I had to make was to just surrender the struggle and just trust the journey and totally relax into that ease and the flow of what felt most natural to me in the moment. And also through attracting the opportunities, I guess, as a generator, that's just kind of
Yeah.
how things work for me. And I just felt this really beautiful resonance once I started slowing down, and I understood that trying to keep forcing things that I thought I should be doing. I did it one more time this year, maybe a couple more times, like I tried from time to time, but I noticed that was really a conditioned pattern. Like for me this year, it's really been the creative path that's been calling me. And then there was like this part of me that, like, every time I had a bit of space and maybe I had signed a new client, then I was like, oh, maybe now I can launch something, I can do like the coaching thing. And but every single time I put out an offer, immediately somebody reached out to me for an oracle card deck. And then I was like, okay, you know I put out the intention to move forward in my business, but then at the same time, life just brought me what I actually needed.
Yes.
And I've really learned to trust this, and I've really learned to see
Mm,
that, some things, maybe some desires even that I had, were actually not my truth, but were more from the mind and just the conditioning. I'd been in this pattern for so long.
yes.
And I mean,
Metal though,
the
isn't it?
main the main work that I'm doing now is basically just whenever I'm ready for the next level, is instead of, figuring out what I need to do, is I just step back and I relax into my space of ease, and I just listen, and I just trust that something's gonna show up. And it's been so magical and so beautiful to see that it actually works, and it just makes
Yeah.
everything so much easier. And when I was in the space of constantly trying to force things to happen, or do more, or get things off my to-do list, it wasn't working at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was a time in the past when that was working, but I think just through all the deconditioning that I've done over many, many years, like, I rewired my system to actually work the natural way, the way it's natural for me. And so through that, what actually happened was that just the old ways of doing things weren't working anymore.
Yes.
And ultimately I just had to surrender to that experience fully, and I still have to do it.
Yeah.
Pretty much
It's
every
it's
single
wrong.
day, but
Yeah,
mm,
absolutely.
yeah.
That's a very beautiful story. And it's like a perfect match to my own. What's interesting is we talk about ease and we talk about flow, but none of these things come easily. It's like
Mm,
we're so well trained to go in the other direction. And the remarkable thing is really that we're quite capable beings, which is to say that when we make a mental decision, we actually have the capacity to bring it to life. If we decide, I'm going to spend my whole life swimming against the flow for no reason, guess what? We'll do that, and we'll do it pretty well. And some of us, and I believe you're probably one of these types, I know I was, we actually get really good at it. It's like we start to develop all the right muscles for swimming against the flow, and we're like
mhm,
passing people up right and left, and we're like, haha, suckers, and it's like you can be really good at making it hard on yourself. And I guess what you're saying, and what I would completely agree with, is that it can be easier. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a smooth path to remembering what it means to be yourself without all of those layers of conditioning and layers of lies in many cases about what you may or may not need to do. It's actually quite hard to like rewire your whole way of experiencing reality. And it takes courage. It is a risk. There's no guarantee. Really, you're going from this place where you were able to like plot a path and achieve something to this complete blank void of not knowing. It's a test or an experiment. This is a word I keep using, but ultimately you're in the wilderness. You don't know what you're going to find there. you may have heard Tim or Anna talking about the possibilities, that like how rich this can be with possibilities, but ultimately, until you've lived it, no one knows. That's terrifying.
You
In
can't
fact,
know.
you can't know. And even now, even sitting across from one another, we both know that we don't know. Like, we're still inside of that same not knowing. And it's still every single day you're waking up to the questions. And every single day you're waking up to the questions that say, what's next? And every single day you're waking up to the questions that say, is it okay to just sit here and say what's next? Right? It's like, it's quite a practice.
Totally. And I feel right now I'm so much in that space because there has been a lot of change in my business this year. There's been a lot of growth, but now I kind of feel I've in a way hit a little bit of a wall, or I feel there is something new that's wanting to come in, or just next level. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I can just feel it. Like it's this almost like this quantum space where everything is possible, and it's almost like anything could happen. I have
Yeah.
no idea what it is, but I might get a sense, like an intuitive sense of some of the things, but at the same time, um, it's just what I'm feeling right now. I think this would have really scared me in the past, and maybe it's a little bit scary now too, but I've really learned to embrace the adventure. And I think that's one thing I really started exploring like many, many years ago, um, when I was after I quit corporate. I actually, I took what I knew from corporate and turned that into my own business. And then that worked really well for a while. It was, it was fun, and it was the experience that I needed at the time. But then um, I hit this wall as well, where I was just feeling that resistance. I almost like couldn't get myself to do that anymore, move forward in that same direction. And then this whole new path began to open up, where it all just, the journey became about just really embracing like what I was really feeling called to do. It was more on a soul level,
Yes.
and I really learned to live my life this way, just really from moment to moment, and embracing the adventure and not knowing what's going to happen. But um, and then more recently, I mean, that was probably a few years back, to like 3 or 4 years back, I kind of got sucked back into that kind of older mindset, and holding on to wanting to do things in a certain way, or wanting like a certain amount of stability in my life. And um, I realized this year that that's what was keeping me stuck in my life, because I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I was just living in my head, and
Amazing.
um, and I just don't want to be there anymore. To be honest, like, it's, for me, it feels like there's no life there. And when you really surrender, it is scary, but at the same time, so much magic can happen in this space, and it's just so beautiful to see. And
Hmm.
that's just really what I'm leaning into right now. Just really, when I feel myself slipping back into fear, just moving back to trust, and just relaxing, and into the ease, and just knowing, I keep reminding myself, what, no matter what happens, I know I'm going to be okay. And life already knows all the answers. I don't need to figure everything out ahead of time. So,
Yes.
mm,
And your experience, really what you've done by allowing yourself to live inside the story you just shared, is you've allowed yourself to start gathering evidence for, like, in alignment with faith and trust, this space of being like, you know what, life does have my back. And every time that I think I'm up against a wall, a door opens. You know, you kind of have to live it though for a while before you have that evidence. And
mm,
that's where the risk is, I think, at first. Um, Something that, let me see if I can track back, something important came to mind. Oh yes, it's that anyone watching this, you'll hear us talking about the way we felt led or called. Um, Something that I think is important to make clear at the outset is that not everyone knows what they're called to do. Not everyone knows, like, you can feel deeply uncomfortable and misaligned with what's available to you right now and have no clue what the next thing is. And I think that that might even possibly have been true for you, Anna. Like if you and I were really honest, I know it was for me. Like you, I had become very successful um, working in business development. So I was actually helping like multimillionaires build tons of businesses. And then from there, I was established, basically took the experience that I had gathered there, and I opened my own business called Draft My Story, and it was a copywriting business, and it was successful.
You've been a copywriter too. Cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's
I
right.
love that.
Um, that's right. I always enjoy like thinking about that. So we both love writing, and this is such a beautiful example too, because I thought because I loved writing, I was supposed to be a writer, and so I built this business around writing. And 6 months into this business, which was succeeding, I was making more money than I had ever made in my life. In the heart of it all in San Francisco, working remotely. I mean, I had so much more space. It was a liberating step for me to build this business, and yet here I am at the top of this peak, and everything was right. The money was there, the freedom. My parents were proud of me in what felt like the first time ever. But it was lifeless. And oh, what what a despairing moment that was, to recognize that I had the thing that I had set out to achieve. All of the pieces were in order. It was like the chessboard was set, and still I lost. It was like I thought I had the checkmate, and instead I lost my king. That's what it felt like, and it was miserable, frankly, miserable, because I had put all my um, eggs in that one basket, so to speak, and I didn't know what came next. But at this much, I did know what I was doing had no life in it. It was not authentic to me, even though I thought it should be. So you can only argue with that for so long before that misery just kind of comes to a fever pitch, and that's what happened for me. So when I eventually closed my business entirely, um, and moved on from there, it wasn't to do something else, because I didn't know what else to do. I was really at my wit's end. I felt as though I had done everything there was to do, and what's left now? All I knew is that I needed to find what was mine, what actually had life in it, what felt authentic. And so I began to feel into that calling, even though I didn't know what I was being called to. And I have to be honest with you, to this day, I still don't know. These mirror sessions came to life of their own accord, and I am having a blast every day with every person that I speak to from all around the world. It's amazing. Tomorrow I could wake up and they could be a thing of the past. At some point, I know for a fact that life is going to call me into this next phase of whatever, and I don't know what it's going to look like. I will know when the impulse arrives, and then I will say, aha, I know the flavor of this call, and then I'll follow it, even though it will be a mystery the whole way along. So don't feel bad if you're watching this and you're like, oh man, like when do I get my call?
Mm. I've definitely experienced both. And what you just shared about your copywriting business, actually, that was very similar for me. That
Really?
was the very beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. And, I had everything, the more freedom and everything. But
Yeah.
then I realized that there was more to it than that. There was just like a sense of purpose that was missing. And that was the resistance that I was feeling. Like on the outside, everything looked amazing. I had
Yeah.
all the success and the freedom and everything that I wanted, but inside there was that emptiness. And I mean, initially it was fun because I learned a lot, and that's just how I flow. And I learned about blogging and all those things, and I had a lot to explore. But then there was just something else that was calling me, and I started exploring, and then the answers just came very naturally. It didn't take very long, actually. But that other time when I was really holding on to that coaching business, that just had never really felt completely aligned for me, and I was in that space of denial, that where I just I was holding on out of fear. And then I was constantly trying to figure things out with my mind. And I think when I was in that space, then the answers just didn't come. And it
Work.
wasn't until um, I just let that go, and I started to trust what I was actually feeling in my body, which leads me to the next question that I will have for you. Um, when I did that, then things just really started flowing, and I started getting those answers more through, not just through the inner impulses, but actually through the outside as well, that then just where I saw the reflection of that excitement then, when I had people randomly reach out to me. I mean, that's one of the first things that happened just right after the beginning of this year, when I just knew I had to let everything go and be open to something new. A friend of mine actually reached out to me. She had seen a post that I shared on Facebook like earlier, well, I think in 2018, after I did my taxes. I just like, it was like a short one-liner, taxes done and paid. And she reached out to me because she was so impressed that, I did everything so quickly in like half an hour or so, or less than an hour, everything was done. And she wanted to know my secret. and and then she asked me to um, create a spreadsheet for her, just based on exactly what she needed. And so that was kind of my introduction to coming back to this creative space this year. And I just felt the resonance in my heart. It was just so exciting to me, even though it was like kind of a smaller project. But so this is how the opportunities started coming for me. And
It's the magic.
absolutely.
You
And
can't plan that.
yeah, so anyway, the next question that I had for you, and I think this might be kind of, yeah, then I think we're gonna wrap up things pretty soon after that. But one thing that really drew me to your work as well, I've heard you talk about this a few times. I actually listened to some of your podcasts before we started interacting on a more regular basis, and I heard you talking about like this concept of listening to your body, and you also brought that up in our recent session, and I've seen you share posts about that like so many times. And so basically, you're talking about like the special kind of intelligence that lives in the human body versus what we would consider the mind,
Yeah.
and how actually kind of surrendering to that intelligence or allowing it can create a totally different kind of experience. So I would just love for you to share a little bit more about that. Like, why is this so important? And I guess the other part would have been what can happen, what kind of magic can happen when you do that. I think we've already kind of answered that question, but
Yeah,
um,
that's
so
true. Okay, this is a fun question. And I love that you noticed that. I understand that for anyone paying close attention to me, I can be a bit like a one-track record, because I'm always focused on bringing these beautiful concepts down into the body of our experience. How can we make it alive? How can we make it come alive? And this also answers a previous question, which is kind of like what sets my work in these mirror sessions and whole system human apart from anything anyone else is doing. And for me, the answer always comes back to embodiment. It's like, how can we live inside of these ideas? How can we make them so practical that you're learning when you're vacuuming the house or going grocery shopping or engaged in a conversation with a friend? Now, how can we make it that simple and that available in every moment? The interesting thing about the body for me is that the body is always with you. And if you understand how to interact with it, then the learning that you can gain as a result of that interaction with your own body is 100% free. You know, there's nothing more powerful to me than the human body. There's no doorway more direct into spirituality, into self-understanding, into the ease and the abundance that we've been referring to. No doorway more appropriate or more available than the physical form itself. So for me, this space of the body is verdant with possibility. It's just so fertile. Um, in the whole system human methodology, there are three pillars. One of them is called body listening. And this idea of body listening, it's got a few pieces to it. You know, first we have to recognize that there's value to the, you have to recognize there's an intelligence in the human body. That alone is kind of a leap for a lot of people. Now, most of us have kind of grown up considering the mind to be where it's at in terms of intelligence. It's the idea of smartness, and it's really based in intellect. You know, how much do you know? How much can you, like, how effectively can you think about things and calculate and strategize and all this? It's mind-based. The body itself has an intelligence too. So the first step is to recognize that there's an intelligence in the body. The next step is to recognize that the body has been communicating your whole life. The body communicates. Yeah, there are these signaling systems, the senses themselves. It's a communication system. And the body communicates in ways that we often can't miss. And that kind of goes back to, if we were to rewind to our conversation earlier about food and the physical discomforts and things, our bodies were telling us, hey, hello, help.
Yeah.
It's like the body speaks to the mind. And I actually do believe that this is the case, that there are these two completely distinct bodies of consciousness held inside the individual human form, and that they communicate, and that they can in fact be harmonized, and they can come into a beneficial relationship to one another. So the body has an intelligence. The body is communicating its needs, and you can learn how to listen in for those needs. So you turn the mental attention inward, and all of a sudden now your path for self-discovery, it's just like, wow, it opens up, I believe, indefinitely. And you come into connection with yourself in a whole new way. You also bring a lot of this kind of like frenetic conceptual energy down into the body, and there's a real power to that too, as you kind of come into your own feet for once. Once you begin to hear what the body is saying, then you can begin to interpret what it's saying. And that's another, each of these steps is kind of a leap in and of itself, because, okay, you hear it. Now, like, I have a connection to the discomfort in my stomach, but what does it mean? And so there's this whole process of learning how to decipher what's being said. But this process, there's nothing more exciting in life, truly, because once you begin to step forward into this experience of befriending yourself, everything in life opens up to you. Because all of the energy that was being depleted up here in trying to do things right and figure things out and hustle and achieve and all of this now comes into the space of the present moment. You can't actually, this is interesting, you can't experience sensation outside of the present moment, which means that every time you bring your attention into the body and experience from that sensory, like, inside out perspective what's happening, you become present.
Mm-hmm.
So body listening is itself a doorway into mindfulness, meditation, all of these things that we would otherwise kind of segment to maybe a certain portion of our day. And here you can connect. I've been connecting to it through this whole call, adjusting my spine. You catch me kind of like fussing with my hair. I'm not actually being like vain. I just love the texture of it, and it brings me into the body. These are ways that we can interact with ourselves. And when we do that, life opens up. So I could go on about that for days too.
Yeah, this definitely resonates so deeply, and I just love this term that you're using, body listening, because this has been so much my own experience too. And back in 2018, the experience that I shared when I was just feeling so disconnected from myself, that was actually the first thing I did, just to really come back into my body and just sit with myself. And it took some practice initially, like
Yeah.
asking myself, like, what am I actually feeling, and really going deeper there, because I was so disconnected. I couldn't even really feel what was going on in my body and my emotional system.
Yes.
And through that, everything else then began to open up. So it's been a practice for me, like I would say, like the past couple years. And now I'm just flowing with a lot less resistance. So I don't constantly have to ask myself, what am I feeling? But I'm just trusting what I'm feeling in the moment. So
Amazing.
yeah.
It's really, really interesting, exciting, and important topic. I hope that actually, as you and I continue in conversation one way or another, we can like constantly dig deeper into this. And I hope that anyone who's watching this will like get the sense for its importance and join us in that like deepened conversation. It's really important.
Yeah, I definitely love to explore this. I mean, there's so much more I know that we could talk about. So for today, I think I'd like to start wrapping up our conversation. And I just wanted to ask you if there is anything else that you wanted to share with our viewers.
Normally, I have something real witty to say. To be very honest, though, this conversation has been rich. So I don't have anything that I would add beyond what we've already touched on. I guess one thing that comes to mind, here we are. Okay. It's that there is it may not seem this way, But there is a direct link between what we've ended this conversation with in terms of body listening and the importance of coming down into your own experience and business. One of the things that I'm here to do is to blur the lines between all these different categories that we've set up for ourselves. That's what whole system human is actually all about. It's about recognizing that everything is connected and that you can't just be a professional here and then go to yoga over here. These things are all happening together. So as we blur the lines between the physical form and business, you'll actually find that being embodied is precisely what allows for your business to flourish.
I couldn't agree more.
Cool. All right. Nailed it.
Thank you so much for that.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
definitely resonates. And so the last thing I wanted to ask you, basically for our viewers, if anybody's interested in working with you or getting in touch with you, where can they find you and what's the best way to get in touch?
Okay, thank you. Facebook is a really fun way to connect with me, although it's getting a little trickier. I think I'm almost at my 5,000 friend limit, which is crazy to me, by the way. So if you can't connect with me on Facebook, find me at timothybrainard.com. Easy enough, it's my name, timothybrainard.com, and that's where you can learn about mirror sessions. There's a ton of content on there, which is free. You can take it and run with it, enjoy it in audio form, text form, visual form. So enjoy that. Wholesystemhuman.com if you're interested in what we discussed there and you want to learn more about it. A friend referred to that as my embodied dissertation, so have fun with that one. And then the ukebug.com. I got to plug what my parents are doing here. It's a fun one too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And
Thank you, Anna.
I will leave all those links in the description below this video as well, so it'll be easy to just go and click, and
Great.
it'll be easy
You've
to
been so
find
good.
you.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed my conversation with you today once again, and it was such an honor and a pleasure to
For me
connect
too.
again. And yeah, I wanted to say thank you to everybody who is watching this video as well, or who will be watching a bit later. And definitely feel free to reach out to Tim or myself as well and leave comments, and we can continue this conversation.